The Valoran Grand Council chamber was a cathedral of arrogance. Its ceiling arched high above the assembly, latticed with strips of amber light that cast a warm glow upon the curved obsidian floor. 14 thrones formed a great ring, each occupied by a representative of a species that had ruled this arm of the galaxy for centuries. The air was heavy with the subtle hum of translation drones, the faint ozone tang of ionized shields, and the smug anticipation of a verdict already decided. Commander Elias Kane stood alone in the center, hands folded behind his back, a single insignia marking him as Earth's envoy. His navy uniform was plain compared to the jeweled robes and carapaced armor of those seated above him. They looked down as though observing an insect. High Chancellor Varix Drawl leaned forward on his throne, a figure of polished bronze scales and calculating eyes. His long digits drummed the armrest. So, this is humanity's voice? One man, one uniform, no fleet, no pledge of tribute? Curious. Ripples of laughter followed, a chorus of wet clicks, rasping chuffs, and hissing exhalations from the alien counselors. They enjoyed the performance. They always had. Kane's expression did not flicker. Earth sends one because one is enough to hear your demands, he said evenly. His voice carried, unhurried, modulated to cut through the layered translation echoes. And perhaps one is enough to give our answer. You call this an answer? A hulking Thren delegate snarled, plates along its shoulders rattling. We offered you terms. Kneel, pay reparations for trespassing in our trade corridors, and be spared. Instead you delay, you send words. Do you think the galaxy bends for delay? The laughter swelled again, this time sharper, almost gleeful. Kane waited until it subsided. High Chancellor Drawl rose, his bronze crest catching the chamber lights. Commander Kane, he said, voice silky with contempt, Earth is a fragment. A backwater world that clawed its way to the stars on borrowed engines and obsolete drives. We have tolerated your stumbling in the dark lanes of our empire for too long. The Council will not debate your worth. It has judged it. He gestured, and a holographic star map flared to life, sole marked by a faint blue glow at the edge of the chart. Red lines, representing Valoran patrol routes, encircled it like a tightening noose. You will disarm your fleets, Drawl continued, cede your stations beyond the Kuiper frontier, and deliver tribute for 10 cycles. In return, the Valoran Empire guarantees your survival. And if we decline? Kane asked. Then your species becomes a lesson, Drawl said. A necessary one. The silence that followed was deliberate, an invitation for the human to plead, to bargain, to grovel. But Kane did none of those. He studied the holographic projection, its sweeping lines and proud red sigils, as though appraising a museum relic rather than a noose. Your terms, he said finally, will be conveyed to Earth's Council. I am authorized to acknowledge receipt, not to capitulate. A ripple of irritation crossed the chamber. A Sliverian matriarch coiled her long neck low, her voice like dry reeds. You continue to posture, human. Do you not grasp the magnitude of the power arrayed before you? Kane's eyes shifted, cold but calm. I grasp it, he said. For centuries, we have heard how inevitable your power is. How permanent. How absolute. He paused, letting the weight of the word settle, then inclined his head slightly. Not a bow, but a motion so controlled it drew a flicker of frown from Drawl. And yet here you are, explaining inevitability. That earned a few sharp clicks of disapproval. Drawl waved a hand, cutting them off. You are brave, the Chancellor said. Or foolish. History will decide which. History has a way of revising its opinions, Kane murmured. He stepped back from the map's glow and gestured for the hologram to dim. Earth will respond in due course. We have no interest in needless bloodshed. Then surrender, Drawl said flatly. Kane did not answer that. Instead, he reached into his jacket, withdrew a slim data wafer, and placed it on the pedestal before him. A formal acknowledgement of your ultimatum, he said. Signed, sealed, time-stamped. Time-stamped, Drawl echoed with a sneer. Do you imagine that matters? Kane met his gaze at last. Level, unwavering. It might. In the future, it is useful to know when certain lines were drawn. Something in his tone, not the words themselves, but the steadiness behind them, caused a brief, subtle shift in the room. A whisper of unease. quickly buried. Drawl recovered with a sharp motion of his clawed hand. "You will return to your rock," he said. "You have 7 cycles to deliver compliance. After that, the Council votes war." 7 cycles, Kane repeated quietly, as though committing it to memory. "Then I will take my leave." He turned, the hum of the chamber doors rising behind him. His adjutant, a young officer standing at the threshold, gave him a quick nod as he passed. Together they walked the long corridor that led out of the Grand Council's heart, their steps echoing against the polished obsidian tiles. Only when the doors sealed did the adjutant break his whisper. "Sir, they think we're cornered." Kane's jaw tightened, the only sign of emotion he allowed himself. "They think we're late to the war," he said softly. "They have no idea we already left them behind." The adjutant glanced at him, uncertain if he'd heard correctly. But Kane did not elaborate. His mind was elsewhere, on coordinates locked beneath encryption, on fleets that did not yet exist in any alien registry, on a technology so far beyond the Valorans' comprehension it might as well be myth. Outside the Council spire, the alien capital's skyline stretched in layered tiers of metal and light. Gunships patrolled the upper lanes, proud banners draped the towers, and in the distance, the great shipyards glinted like skeletal suns. It was a civilization convinced of its supremacy, confident that tomorrow would resemble today, and that the small, blue world on the fringe of its empire would bow as countless others had. Kane stepped into the shuttle's hold, feeling the deck hum beneath his boots as the clamps released. As the city receded below, he watched the banners shrink to threads, the shipyards to points of light. In their reflection on the viewport, his own face looked carved from the same metal. Calm, immovable, quietly waiting. The Valorans had laughed. They would again. Laughter was easy, before the silence that follows. The command bunker beneath Mare Tranquillitatis was silent except for the faint hum of air recyclers. Banks of hollow screens glowed against the lunar stone, each displaying a different facet of Earth's hidden preparations. Dry docks around Neptune, cold storage vaults orbiting Europa, ghost relays anchored beyond the heliopause. None of it officially existed. Commander Elias Kane stepped onto the central platform, the lunar dust still clinging to his boots from the shuttle ride down. Around him, admirals and agency directors straightened, their conversations cutting short. The Council on Earth had entrusted him with what no politician could carry, the weight of a fleet that would never appear on a public registry. "Status," he said. A projection unfolded. 7 task groups, their trajectories drawn in pale blue threads, each linked by a lattice of tachyon relays. The network looked almost fragile, a web stretching beyond the known trade lanes, but its pulse carried a different promise. "Fleet Corps is assembled," Admiral Roche replied. Her face was lined, her voice unshaken. 18 dreadnoughts, 39 cruisers, 200 escort hulls. Tachyon arrays tested. Instantaneous synchronization confirmed. Power reserves stable. "And the Valoran scouts?" Kane asked. "They're mapping our periphery," Roche said. "Close enough to smell the bait, not close enough to see the teeth." He studied the map, the red sigils creeping toward Sol like slow-moving rust. "They believe what they want to believe," Kane murmured. "That we are late, that we are slow." A communications officer approached, holding a wafer of intercepted signals. "Council broadcast," she said. "Their ultimatum has been transmitted to the outer colonies. Civilian traffic is unsettled." Kane took the wafer, scanned the lines. It was exactly as expected, a threat disguised as law. Surrender or be erased. "Let them rattle the gates," he said, handing it back. "Panic serves them more than warships." Across the table, Director Hahn of Intelligence leaned forward, his expression skeptical. "You gave them 7 cycles. That's less than a standard month. Are we ready to act if they advance before then?" Kane met his gaze. "Readiness is not the question. Timing is." Hahn exhaled through his nose. "You're still thinking like a diplomat." "I'm thinking like a strategist," Kane corrected. "Diplomats declare the war they want. Strategists choose the one they can win." The room held its breath for a moment. No one challenged him after that. A new feed shimmered to life, an image from the Kuiper Belt, grainy but clear enough, a Valoran scout cutter drifting near a darkened buoy. The next frame was empty space. No explosion, no debris trail. Simply gone. Admiral Roche arched a brow. "Malfunction." Kane shook his head. Trial. He tapped the screen, and a faint afterimage appeared, a ripple in the void where the cutter had been, a signature only Tachyon sensors could read. They crossed the line we don't draw twice. Han's lips pressed thin. So it begins. No, Kane said quietly. It began years ago. They're only starting to notice. A murmur of agreement passed through the officers. There was no applause, no triumphant roar. Every person in that room understood what they were about to unleash, and what it would cost if they failed. Later, as the meeting dispersed, Kane stepped into the narrow observation corridor overlooking the lunar horizon. Earth hung in the distance, a pale disk wrapped in cloud and shadow. Its oceans glinted faintly, serene despite the encroaching storm. Roche joined him, hands clasped behind her back. They'll come in force, she said. You saw their numbers. I did, Kane said. And they'll bring more. They want to make an example. Then why not strike first? Because a strike warns them, he replied. A silence frightens them. She considered that. You really think we can hold the line? Kane's eyes didn't leave the earth. We won't hold the line. We'll redraw it. Down in the assembly bays, the future took shape. Rows of angular hulls lay dormant, matte plating catching the worklights in sharp relief. Each bore no insignia, no registry. The crews moved like shadows, trained to say nothing outside the docks. What they built was not meant to be revealed until the moment it mattered. Technicians checked tachyon nodes along the spines of the dreadnoughts, spindly arrays of silver-black crystal, pulsing faintly with a rhythm that did not belong to normal space. One wrong sequence and a ship would vanish into non-existence. One correct pulse, and it could traverse 10 light-years in the time a Valoran officer took to blink. Kane walked the catwalk above them, the low thrum of power vibrating through his boots. He remembered the council chamber's laughter, the way it had rolled over him like static. They thought Earth's silence meant weakness. They had not learned what silence could carry. An engineer approached, helmet under his arm. Commander, he said, the Vanguard class is ready for final calibration. Once we synchronize the lattice, we can disperse across every vector you requested. Good, Kane said. Keep the signatures dark. No beacon, no drift pulse. The man nodded. Understood. By the third day, whispers spread through the civilian channels. Traders spoke of missing Valoran patrols. Mining crews along the Neptune frontier reported unmarked shadows moving with unnatural precision. Officially, nothing existed. Unofficially, the balance had begun to tilt. In the secured communications hub, Kane drafted a message to the Planetary Council. It was brief, free of bravado. 7 cycles remain. They believe us unprepared. Do not contradict them. Delay is victory. He signed it with his diplomat seal, the same one he had used when bowing to alien laughter. No one outside the encrypted channels would know the difference. Night on the moon was a still thing, and Kane allowed himself one moment in that stillness. He stood by the outer dome, stars burning cold above the regolith. Somewhere beyond that darkness, the Valorans were assembling their judgment. He wondered if any of them had paused to ask why Earth had been so quiet for so long. His adjutant approached, carrying a tablet of updated movements. More probes near the heliopause, the young officer said. They're mapping the decoys. Let them, Kane said. Every decoy they map is 1 more hour we buy. The officer hesitated, then asked, and when they stop mapping? Kane turned his gaze from the stars to the shadows beneath them. Then, he said, we stop waiting. The fleet did not roar. It did not march. It waited, silent, coiled, threaded through the dark like a wire ready to spark. Out in the void, the first ripple of war had already passed. The Valorans would see it only when it was far too late to matter. Kane left the dome, the stars shrinking behind him as the hatch sealed. There was work yet to do, and 7 cycles were a short eternity. The Valoran fleet arrived in fragments first, scout wings, logistics carriers, skirmish pickets, each more brazen than the last. They crossed the Kuiper boundary as if it were a suggestion, their beacons blazing in open defiance. By the time the main armada assembled near Pluto's shadow, the network chatter across the Sol system had already shifted from rumor to certainty. War had begun, even if the declaration was still wrapped in ceremony. From the bridge of the diplomatic carrier Aegis, Commander Elias Kane watched their formations flicker on the tactical array. Crimson arcs encircled the outer planets, each marking a blockade vector. The Valorans had learned only half their lesson from history. How to encircle a world, not how to measure what lay inside its silence. 7 cycles, they said. The adjutant murmured beside him. We're not even halfway through the 3rd. They're impatient, Kane replied. His voice betrayed neither irritation nor surprise. That's the first thing a predator shows when it's unsure of the kill. The comms officer turned from her console. Incoming demand. Commander. Priority seal from High Chancellor Drawl. Put it through. The holographic display bloomed above the table. Drawl's bronze-scaled form filled the frame. His crest flared in ceremonial dominance. Behind him, the Valoran War Council pulsed with quiet approval. Commander Kane, Drawl said, his voice lacquered with disdain. Your world plays at patience while our fleets establish rightful order. You have until the next cycle's turn to submit or we begin reduction. This is your final notice. Kane inclined his head, a motion neither submissive nor dismissive. Your fleets are ahead of schedule, he said. Is there reason for haste? Drawl's jaw flexed. Your reason is irrelevant. Compliance is not a debate. And yet you continue to explain it, Kane said. The alien's pupils narrowed to slits. Are you mocking the authority of the Valoran Empire? Kane let the question hang. Authority isn't mocked by words, Chancellor. It is mocked by time. We will use what little of it you have granted. Drawl's image crackled, his final words clipped. Your silence will buy you nothing. The transmission ended. Far from the diplomatic posturing, the hidden fleet stirred. Tachyon relays pulsed in the black, weaving silent corridors across the system. Each jump point was locked in layered encryption, each warship a shadow until the command lattice lit. Admiral Roche's voice came over the secure channel. They've committed their second vanguard to the outer belt. Heavy hulls, but spread too thin. If we cut them now... No, Kane interrupted. Not yet. You plan to let them build momentum? I plan to let them believe they have it. She exhaled, the sound of someone accustomed to patience yet weary of its price. Understood. In the asteroid ring between Mars and Jupiter, civilian haulers whispered along hidden routes. Their transponders carried harmless cargo codes, or water, polymers, but each hull concealed modular weapon banks and tachyon cores disguised as bulk containers. Convoys passed within view of Valoran patrols, their true nature unnoticed. Each day the noose tightened, and each day humanity added another thread to the blade inside it. At the Luna command station, Kane reviewed intercepted reports. The Valoran commanders were confident. Their communiques brimmed with the language of inevitability. Phrases like containment perimeter and civilian processing littered their orders. It was the arrogance of an empire that had never fought an enemy it did not first cripple. Sir, the intelligence officer said, they've begun staging atmospheric processors near Neptune, claiming it's for blockade support. Kane's eyes lingered on the data. They're marking territory, not preparing war. They still think we'll fold. Should we make a statement? He shook his head. Not yet. 3 days later, the first sparks flared. A Valoran frigate strayed past the designated corridor near Triton, broadcasting demands to a civilian mining cluster. The cluster responded with silence, its lights cold, its transponders dark. Minutes later, the frigate vanished from all known telemetry. When Valoran recovery teams arrived, they found nothing. No debris, no thermal residue, not even a trail. Only an empty stretch of space where coordinates no longer aligned. Within the Fleet Council, speculation crackled. Was it an accident? A rift? Sabotage? Kane fed none of the answers, only shadows. The message was simple. Every inch they advanced carried a cost they could not calculate. The Planetary Council on Earth convened in a sealed session, their debate laced with unease. They're escalating, one minister said. The colonies are afraid. They want us to negotiate openly. With what leverage? Another countered. A signature of surrender? That only quickens the blade. All eyes turned to Kane, the only man in the room who had faced the Valorans and returned. You've seen them, the council chair said. What's their threshold? They don't have one, Kane answered. They measure strength by fear. Give them either, and they will take both. A silence settled. No one suggested surrender again. Night crept across the Pacific as Kane left the council chambers. Outside, the city lights gleamed against the ocean, unaware of the fleets massing beyond sight. His adjutant walked beside him, voice low. Every day we delay, the colonies grow more restless. They want proof. They'll have proof, Kane said. But not before the Valorans believe there is none. Is that wise? It's necessary. Far beyond, in the empty gulf past the heliopause, the Tachyon vanguard aligned. Their engines pulsed faintly, locked in a pattern no alien sensor could trace. Coordinates shifted, forming a net around the invading armada, each node waiting for the single command that would cut space itself. Kane reviewed the final decoy movements, outdated cruisers pushed forward, false transmissions leaking from automated buoys, whispers seated in the very channels Valoran scouts prided themselves on cracking. Every step, every delay, was a thread in the snare. They think we scatter, he murmured in the solitude of his cabin. Let them. By the fifth cycle, the Valorans had grown bold. Their war council broadcast another declaration. Earth would be reduced to compliance, its fleet dismantled, its colonies annexed. The ultimatum's language no longer dressed itself as diplomacy. It was conquest, plain and unvarnished. On Luna, the command bunker lit with quiet activity. Officers moved with precision, their faces drawn but resolute. The waiting was nearly over. Kane stepped to the central console, eyes sweeping the map one last time. Red arcs now surrounded the inner planets, their edges overlapping like the jaws of a trap. Only the trap was not theirs. Begin the lattice synchronization, he ordered. A chorus of confirmations followed. The mocking war had begun without a single formal volley. The Valorans believed they were tightening the grip. In truth, their fleets had already crossed the event horizon of a conflict they could not escape. The quiet between pulses was not weakness. It was the sound of the trigger being set. Kane allowed himself one slow breath. They wanted a spectacle, he said, almost to himself. They will have one. Just not the one they rehearsed. The Valoran armada had grown into a steel horizon beyond Saturn, its war banners casting long shadows across the rings. Each cycle brought more carriers, more siege engines, more arrogance. Their beacons flooded the system with declarations of dominance, their transmissions filled with the language of conquest. Earth's channels responded with measured quiet. In the Mare Tranquillitatis bunker, the War Council met without ceremony. The lights were dim, the walls lined with silent hollow panels showing the swarm of red markers tightening around the inner planets. Kane stood at the center, a calm axis in the storm of reports. They've anchored their siege line, Admiral Roche said, tapping a cluster of crimson icons near Titan's orbit. Fuel depots, troop carriers, command corps, all positioned. They think this will be quick. Kane's gaze lingered on the map. Quickness is the mask they wear when they're unsure. Han from Intelligence slid a new set of data into the display. We've intercepted their fleet logs. Supply convoys are running late, patrol paths are overlapping, and at least 3 of their forward bases have gone dark without explanation. Without explanation to them, Kane corrected. His tone was even, but his fingers tightened briefly behind his back. The net is closing. Now they will start to feel it. 2 days later, a Valoran convoy disappeared near the Sharon relay. Not crippled. Erased. No debris, no distress call, only silence where 30 hulls had traveled. The next morning, a carrier group over Titan reported critical system malfunctions. Power grids shutting down, comms collapsing in mid-signal, munitions failing to cycle. Their engineers blamed sabotage. Their commanders blamed panic. In a private channel, Dral's voice crackled with frustration. You said they had no capacity to resist at this scale. Why do we lose ships to ghosts? His subordinate hesitated. Sensors register. Distortions. Chancellor. We cannot trace them. Distortions do not erase fleets, Dral snarled. Find me the cause. The summit was called aboard a neutral platform in Jovian orbit. A final charade of diplomacy. Kane arrived with a single escort craft, walking the long corridor to the council chamber as if it were any other negotiation. Dral awaited him, flanked by 2 towering guards, his bronze crest catching the cold light. You return again with words, Drawl said. Do you think the galaxy bends for your patience? Kane removed his gloves, folding them neatly. I return because you keep asking for answers. You were given a deadline, Drawl pressed. It passes soon. And yet your fleets stumble before it does. A ripple of unease passed through the alien entourage. Drawl's eyes narrowed. Accidents. Sabotage. Nothing more. Kane stepped closer, voice steady. Then explain the voids in your own logs. Explain the convoys that vanish without a flare. Explain why your armada starves one ring at a time. You threaten us, Drawl hissed. No, Kane said softly. I inform you. That night, the Valoran War Council convened in frantic session. Reports of missing ships multiplied, a cruiser wing near Neptune gone without signal, a refinery station on the outer arc abandoned in mid-shift, its crew untraceable. Their admirals demanded tighter formations. Their quartermasters screamed for resupply. The Empire had come to conquer, and found itself bleeding without a battle. Kane watched their broadcasts from the lunar bunker, his adjutant beside him. They're panicking, the younger officer said. They're recalculating, Kane replied. Panic is when you scream. This is when you whisper too loudly. Should we move? Not until they collapse their own lines. Each convoy they reroute leaves a gate open. By the sixth cycle, the Valorans tightened their perimeter, pulling ships inward to guard the siege cores. Their outer patrols thinned, their supply chains strained. Whispers of sabotage spread among their crews. Unseen strikes, corridors that folded and erased them, echoes of weapons no one had seen before. In a sealed channel, Drawl confronted Kane one last time. The alien's voice carried less steel than before. We have tolerated your delay long enough. Are these disappearances your doing? Kane looked straight at the hollow projection. You believe they are. That's what matters. Drawl's crest lowered. You cannot win this. We are the core. You are a frontier. Kane's words cut clean. Frontiers are where empires begin to die. On Earth, the civilian networks buzzed with speculation. Why had the bombardment not begun? Why were the invaders suddenly quiet? Official broadcasts gave no answers, but freighters whispered of Valoran supply fleets that never arrived. Miners told stories of ghost signals trailing the blockade. Fear began to shift, from Earth's people to its enemies. Kane spent those nights in the observation dome, the stars sharp against the void. His adjutant approached again, a tablet in hand. 3 more convoys lost, the young officer reported. No survivors, no transmissions. Kane's gaze did not move from the horizon. Good. Every silence buys the next. The Valoran commanders met in orbit above Saturn, their banners dimmed, their channels encrypted. They argued over strategies, bombardment without logistics, retreat with pride intact, or negotiation with a species they had already mocked before the galaxy. Drawl stood at the center, his hands gripping the table's edge. They were nothing, he growled. They had no fleets to challenge us. An aide whispered, Then where are our fleets now? The silence that followed was heavier than any threat. Back on Luna, Kane reviewed the final synchronization orders. Tachyon relays pulsed faintly in the void, their lattice complete. The fleets waited, not scattered, but folded between coordinates the Valorans could not chart. Every strike so far had been a whisper, a warning. The real blow had yet to fall. He keyed the encrypted channel to Earth's council. 7 cycles nearly spent, he said. Their pride has drawn them into the gap. Once they step fully, we close it. Will they see it coming? The council chair asked. No, Kane said. They will hear the silence first. The 6th cycle waned. The Valoran armada, once a roaring horizon, now looked frayed around its edges. Its war drums echoed in empty corridors. Its triumph tasted of iron. And through it all, Earth remained quiet, watching. The trap was ready. Kane stood alone in the bunker's central hall, the star map before him. The red arcs that once pressed inward now showed gaps, small at first, widening each hour. He traced one line with his finger, then let his hand fall. They thought silence was surrender, he murmured. They never learned what silence can hide. The seventh cycle dawned with a cold stillness over the outer planets. The Valoran fleet drifted in its siege formation, unaware that the stillness was a signal, not a respite. Kane stood in the lunar bunker's command well, watching the tactical overlay. Gaps had widened into corridors. Corridors had become openings. Every move the invaders made to tighten their grip had hollowed their core. A transmission cut through the static. An invitation. Drall summoned Kane for a final council aboard the central flagship, Varen's Claw. No entourage, no preamble. Just a demand wrapped in formality. "They think this will be their verdict," Admiral Roche muttered. "A last chance to make us kneel." Kane fastened his collar. A verdict is only final when all voices are silent. The flagship's hull was a cathedral of dark alloy, its banners lowered but not yet folded. Drall waited on the raised dais, his guards arrayed like statues of bronze and bone. The room smelled of cold oil and tension. "You return again," Drall said, his voice echoing off the ribbed walls. "You come empty-handed, still without tribute, still without surrender." Kane approached the center ring. "I came to witness your answer." "Our answer?" Drall's crest arched. "We are the answer. Your worlds remain only because we allow it." Kane's eyes shifted briefly to the ceiling. A faint shimmer traced along the curved beams, almost imperceptible. "Allowance is a fragile currency." Drall leaned forward, claws clicking against the stone inlay. "You have harassed our fleets. Ghost attacks, vanishings, annoyances, nothing more. Do you think this is war? War is fire. War is the will to erase. And yet," Kane said quietly, "it is your fleets that fade." The council stirred. One of Drall's commanders growled, "Speak your demands or be silent." "I demand nothing," Kane replied. "I offer you a choice. Pull back or witness what you have been circling." The hall dimmed. At first, it seemed like a power fluctuation, a brief pulse that dulled the banner's sheen. Then the transmissions died. Panels along the walls flickered into black. Outside the viewport, the Armada's lights winked out one by one, as if a tide of shadow passed over them. "What is this?" Drall snapped, slamming a claw on the armrest. "Jamming. Sabotage." "No," Kane said. "Alignment." The flagship shuddered, a vibration deep in its spine. Beyond the glass, the Saturnian rings fractured into a lattice of faint blue arcs, each one snapping into place like threads pulled taut. Valoran ships, thousands of them, hung motionless, engines stilled, weapons unresponsive. "They've seized our cores," a voice from the side panel shouted. "Every relay is locked." Drall rose, his silhouette vast against the dying light. "How?" Kane met his gaze without triumph, only finality. "By the time you gathered, you built our map for us. Every transmission you sent, every corridor you anchored, we folded it back. You did not siege a planet, Chancellor. You fed a net." Panic cracked the disciplined veneer of the hall. Officers barked contradictory orders. Guards shifted uncertainly. Drall advanced, claws bared. "You dare strike in parley?" "You demanded war," Kane said, his voice low, and mistook silence for hesitation. A faint tone echoed in the hall. Not a blast, not a scream, just a narrow chime. Drall's stride faltered. His guards stiffened, their visors flickering. The Chancellor's crest twitched, then his frame slackened, a single streak of light tracing his temple. No one had seen a weapon drawn. No one had heard the shot. Drall's massive form collapsed against the dais, the sound of his armor plates clattering louder than any gunfire. The council stared, frozen. Kane turned to the assembly. "This is not annihilation. It is conclusion. Withdraw your fleets. Carry this memory home." A junior officer stammered. You killed the Chancellor." "No," Kane corrected softly. "He killed his empire when he mistook stillness for weakness." Outside, the net contracted. Valoran carriers lost propulsion one by one. Ammunition stores went cold. Reactor chains detached from their loops. The human fleets, those that had never been declared, only hidden, emerged like shadows pulling back a curtain. Not in roaring charge, but in surgical silence. Boarding craft docking with precision, strike teams moving as if on drawn lines. Across the system, broadcasts lit up, Earth remains. The siege is broken. Hours passed. The Valoran Council, stripped of its apex, voted in whispers to retreat. Their war drums, once thunder, now ticked like hollow tin. Convoys unlatched from Saturn's orbit, limping back to the dark corridors they had claimed as theirs. They left without treaties, without parades, carrying the weight of something they could not name. On Luna, Kane returned to the observation dome. The young adjutant who had shadowed him since the first council stood at his side, eyes wide. "You didn't fire a fleet," the officer said. "You fired a moment." Kane placed his gloves on the table, fingers tracing the map of empty space where the siege had been. War is not always the louder hand. Sometimes it is the pause between two demands. Earth did not celebrate openly. Its cities stayed lit, its transmissions calm. There were no parades under the Terran sky, only a quiet relief that rippled through the hidden networks and whispered halls. Humanity had endured, not by matching the Armada ship for ship, but by folding time, patience, and precision into a single silent strike. In the records that followed, no official line declared how the Chancellor died. No image leaked of the net that held the fleet. Only a phrase passed between officers and envoys, spoken like a warning to any who would come next. They demanded war, and never heard it when it came. Kane stood alone before the stars. The siege had lifted, but the galaxy now watched. Earth was no longer a frontier, it was a name on every war table, a question in every imperial court. He whispered to the void, "Let them speak louder next time. We've learned how to listen." And for the first time in 7 cycles, the stars over Saturn were clear.